This mill was a gift from the U.S. government to the Wyandotte people in 1829. I'm Darren, and this is the Industrial Revolution. During the War of 1812, the Wyandotte joined in with the U.S. government to fight on their side, like many of the other Native American tribes in the area. To reward that loyalty, the U.S. government built a sawmill and a gristmill here in northern Ohio, near Upper Sandusky. Now, you'd think that means the U.S. government liked the Wyandotte people here, and they did for a little while. Unfortunately, their support was limited. The Wyandotte lived here along with plenty of black settlers, both freed slaves and free blacks from the north. Lived here, worked well, cooperated. Everything was great. White settlers unfortunately moved in, and as the white population increased, the demands to remove the Wyandottes also increased. And finally in 1843, the federal government forced the Wyandotte people to leave. It was fairly common, unfortunately, through the 1800s. They were forcibly removed to Kansas. And then in 1867, they were again forcibly removed, this time to Oklahoma. You've probably heard of the Trail of Tears with the Cherokee people and being forced to walk. Some have said that the Wyandotte had a far kinder, far easier relocation. They were not forced to walk. Transportation was provided. But honestly, twice in a row, their land, their homes, everything was still stolen. So, not so easy. Well, let's take a look inside. So much of the original milling equipment is still located in the back of the mill. The center area here was more storage and packaging. Right up front, they have a great model of how the mill works. You start at the bottom with the turbine. We'll take a look at those in a minute. You come up, the person dumping grain into a grain elevator, which goes up to the top to be cleaned, comes back down into the millstone through an auger, is ground, and goes back up to the top again. Over a flour dresser or a bolter, which then comes down into these bins. Let's take a look at all these components. The first hopper grain could have been poured into. You have the auger along the bottom as well as a old millstone here. These wooden augers were rotated to the same water power as everything else, and that moved the grain along. You see this little one here is kind of unique. You see the extra holes on it. That actually let you take the wood pegs out, move them to the other holes, and it would actually then push the grain the other direction, which could be useful. Water wheels and turbines only turned one way. Down here we have the last turbine in place. Yeah, this one's not hooked up right now, obviously. We're looking at it through a piece of plexiglass here. The water below us would have been considerably higher. That turbine would have needed to be at a point where the bottom of the turbine was on a flat deck and the water underneath it. There's the water completely covering the turbine. Look up at the top here, see the pulleys. These obviously aren't hooked up. They're connected through the turbines. There were 3 turbines at this mill originally. And they ran everything here. This gear obviously was connected to one of the turbines. And I love the wooden gears. Take a look at these, you can see different lengths of these teeth Those must have been broken off and replaced and broken and replaced and broken and replaced over and over with wear. Over here we have the millstone and the hopper here the grain goes into. Grain goes in from the bins upstairs down this chute. Eventually ends up in this hopper, goes into the eye of the stone. And you can see down in the eye there, then distributes out through the sides of the stone as it's turning. And the grain comes out over on the left side there and gets routed up this elevator up to the bolter upstairs. Again, more gears that aren't actually hooked up to anything right now. You see there's a bunch of these square chutes coming down from upstairs. Every mill I've been in has these, working or not. And that's because mills tended to change over time. As they change, things change positions, they move chutes around, they moved equipment around, and all these chutes just ended up being left in place, and sometimes they might get used again later. But there's no reason to really take them out, so that's why they're here. You have this big arm here with the threaded big bolt on it, and that's actually to lift up the top millstone. Now, why would you need to do that? Well, millstones have to be redressed. If you're using the mill pretty regularly, if you're using it like all day, every day, you might only get about a week or so, maybe a couple weeks. This is especially hard stone here because they're using the flint for the stones. But you're going to have a limited amount of time, and especially if you're grinding wheat, you're going to have to touch up that dressing. So you take the cover off, hook onto the upper millstone, lift it up, flip it upside down, and you can redress both of your stones. Here we have the chute that came down here, and that would have originally gone over to this elevator. You can see the elevator. There's a big cloth belt with little metal buckets on it, and that's what you used pretty much every mill to move your grain around, move your flour around. And these were also water powered. See the pulley down here connects underneath this deck over to one of the turbines. So on this side we have the hopper that the grain would have gone into. It would have come into multiple points up at the top. And you can see it's set up to distribute to multiple points in the bottom. How many was going to depend on how much you were sorting it up above. At your most basic, you'll have flour and other stuff, and you'll just have two. In many cases, you could have at far one side, you'll have cake flour, then slightly more coarse flour, then slightly more coarse flour. And that's really up to the your flour dresser upstairs. This is the thing that will run that. This would have been wrapped in a fabric, a silk, a mesh of some kind. What you use depending on what you were working with and where you were. And you dumped the flour from the millstones into one end, and it was rotating, and as the flour worked its way down, the finest stuff fell out first and went into the first bin in the hopper. And later on, as you work your way down it, you get more and more coarse. So you finally come out the far end with the stuff that was just too big. And depending on what you were doing, that might just get thrown back into the mill, because big pieces could get through. So this is not an original turbine from this mill. This is actually about twice the size of the turbines used in Indian Mill here. It's out here for an example, but it gives you an idea of how these things worked. So the way water turbines work, and check out my video on water turbines if you want a lot more detail, but essentially this type of turbine water is right down here. So this is mounted to a solid waterproof deck. And this whole area above it is completely flooded. You see all these separate plates here on the side. These plates all rotate, controlled by this wheel right here. And of course, this is not something I can rotate by hand. But as you rotate it, these open all at once. Water comes in from all sides of this simultaneously to a sort of a spiral-shaped turbine in the middle, and then exits straight out the bottom. It may seem a little counterintuitive. Why not run it down straight through the center and out through the sides, or straight through the top and out the bottom? This is actually a more efficient way to do it. Again, check out my video on water turbines for more information. And again, this is a little bigger than the one that's inside, about twice the size, really. Two ways down here to get to the turbines. Let's see if we can see anything of them as I head down the stairs here. Okay, so as we look in here, we're looking under the mill. The mill is above us. This area over here, the thing that's missing is that floor that I mentioned that the turbines mount to. We can see the sluiceways, the water gates into that underground space, but we can't really get a good view of what's inside here. Let's go see if we can see more from the other side. We don't have great access down here. You can see through to the lower level. This is where the water normally would have filled up this space. There would have been another floor level on here to hold water at the higher level. And you see the shafts from the two turbines. The third shaft is just out of sight, the remaining turbine. Remember, this is about, the upper level is 3 feet lower, or 30 inches lower than it was. You can see the water still pouring out. That's the above dam level. And it would have drained to the level here right below us, which is the level it would have originally been, and that's the lower level. You had to have a good 3 feet of water, or the turbine simply wouldn't turn. More water was typically better, but occasionally, if the level below the dam came up because of too much water, you could actually wind up with not enough drop anyway. As we move out from the bottom of the mill here, you see it's built right at the crest of the dam. This dam, which was recently rebuilt, is actually a wooden dam. It's not a concrete dam, as I thought it probably would be. The dam is about 30 inches shorter than it was when the mill was actually in operation. And that was done primarily to cut down on the flooding upriver in the town of Upper Sandusky, which is fairly close. They have had a lot of flooding issues in the area. The Great Flood of 1913, of course, did a lot of damage here, as it did throughout this entire region. And actually that flooded up to pretty much the top of the first floor inside the mill at that time. The mill was solid enough, though, that it was able to withstand it. And they continued operation as soon as the water dropped enough that they could continue operations. You can see if you look under the log here, you can actually see some of the wooden structure of that dam. The original dam and the original mill We're a few hundred feet upriver. There's not much left up there. There's rumored to be a pile of dressed stones, which is on private property. Unfortunately, we can't get to that. On this side of the river where the gristmill was located, and apparently nothing left of the sawmill on the far side. The sawmill could have been fairly light. It's probably a portable sawmill. They just built a shed over. The grist mills, though, did need to be pretty solid. So that would be why that one more likely had a actual dressed stone foundation, and the sawmill may not have. So how long can a wooden dam actually hold up? Wood doesn't last long in water, right? Well, take a look at this bench. This bench, which is here in the museum, is from the 1820 wood that was used to construct the original dam. During a drought in 1974, the water was very low, and some of this wood that was used for that dam reappeared at the time. As long as you keep wood completely submerged, it actually holds up surprisingly well underwater. Which is why we still have wooden shipwrecks all over the world, for example. If you keep it high and dry, it also holds up really well. Where you have a problem is if it goes from wet to dry to wet to dry, and then you're lucky to get 20 or 30 years out of it, and often far less than that. But you can see this piece is in surprisingly good condition. So one of the unique features here at the Indian Mill is it's actually the country's first ever educational grist mill. And it was set up in a site that operated as a grist mill to show people how grist mills work. And let's go through a couple of their exhibits. The first technology for grinding grain, one of the first, is the mano and matate. We've talked about these before. You put the grain in here and you literally grind back and forth to get your grain out. Now, one of the drawbacks to this, of course, depending on the stone, you can actually get a lot of grit out of here as well. And that's actually one of the ways that they used to determine the age of human remains when they find them, when they were using this sort of system, is by looking at tooth wear. Because if you were living on grain and you were using something like this, you may have a lot of tooth wear. If you think that's primitive technology, these are still used today. I actually have one of these in my kitchen. These are used to grind spices today. So over here, we actually have an original milling stones that the Wyandotte used. This works exactly like the more modern water power stones, yet this wasn't actually water powered. You'd put the grain in through the eye here, same as you do in modern millstones. But instead of water power or wind power to turn this, there's a pole attached. And this was rotated around with people turning the pole. Grain goes in, flour comes out, and you can get about 10 to 12 bushels of grain a day. Now that doesn't seem like a lot if you're feeding a lot of people, but compared to the previous methods, this is a huge upgrade. If you've seen my water wheel video, you've probably seen something like this. It's a single family millstone. This could be driven easily by a horizontal water wheel on the bottom of it. And that would turn these stones. And this is good for a single family, a single household. Again, compared to grinding by hand with a mortar. This was way faster, way more efficient. With this, you could grind everything you needed fairly quickly, compared to grinding it by hand, where you could spend hours every single day working. And they also have some flint here from Flint Ridge, Ohio. If you have studied Native American history much, this is some of the really good quality flint. And the millstones here are actually made from this flint. So people have often commented on my videos, when I give a name for something, they say, no, that's not what it's called this. And chances are we were both right. A lot of things actually are you have two things that serve the same purpose, or more often, a lot of things are actually regional or by manufacturer. One of those things, for example, is what you use right here to actually do your initial cleaning of the grain. You dump your grain into a hopper, it goes somewhere, and you want to clean it. You want to get all the dirt out, all the weeds, all the dead insects, whatever may have accumulated on it. And the way you do that is through something called a smudder or fanning mill. The term smudder comes from a specific fungus that will grow on wheat kernels, which is called smut. And the smudder abrades that off and has huge fans that blow through it and gets rid of all the smut plus all of the miscellaneous debris in it. Well, a fanning mill does almost exactly the same thing. Focuses a little bit less on smut specifically, but still they're kind of interchangeable. Part of it is where you are, part of it is manufacturer. Another good example of these terms is flower dresser or flower bolter. The two do basically the same thing. They have flour that comes straight off your millstone into one end and it goes out the other. Well, any machine that does that is called a flower dresser. A flower bolter, so every flower bolter is a flower dresser, every flower dresser is not a flower bolter. A flower bolter specifically sorts by fineness of the flour along the way. So it's possible for a flower dresser, especially if you're working maybe with cornmeal, we'll just have the cornmeal you want and the stuff you want to dump back into the mill because it didn't grind fine enough. Whereas a flower bolter, you're going to have several grades. And the way you do that, you take that big wheel we looked at a minute ago, and you just use different screen types on it. And the different screens let you get the different flour grades. So from its beginnings here in the 1820s, when the U.S. government built the mill here for the Wyandotte, through their forced removal, due to white settlers moving into the area and wanting the land, the Reconstruction, 1861, Slater abandonment, sale to the state, and finally turning into a great museum, the first historic milling museum in a actual historic milling site anywhere in the country. Indian Mill is the Industrial Revolution. Hey, wait a second before you go. I really need your help. I love coming out here and filming on location and bringing you all of this great stuff, but it is expensive. So I need you to help me grow the channel, and the easiest way to do that is just hit like. It's easy, it's quick, costs nothing. Hit like on the video if you haven't already. If you can subscribe and hit notify, YouTube will let you know when I have new stuff coming out. Also, share the video with your friends, share it on social media. Let's spread the word. Also, if possible, if you can help me out financially, that would be great. It is not cheap coming out here and making these, aside from the fact that I'm spending many hours researching and editing videos. I do have travel costs that I need to cover. So best ways to do that, you can help out on Patreon. It's patreon.com/industrialrevolution, or just hit the super thanks button on YouTube. That works too. Finally, something I've just set up recently, I do have an affiliate store. Right now it's just through Amazon. If you hit the shop link on either the end screen, which is probably up on the screen right now, or on the video description or the channel description, they'll take you over to my webpage. I do have some live steam engines there, some hand grain grinding equipment there. But if you follow that link over to Amazon, for example, anything you put in your cart, even if you don't buy the thing on the link, the channel will get a percentage of the entire cart purchase. And that's really going to help me a lot. It's going to help me keep making these videos, keep bringing them to you. So thanks again, and I look forward to seeing you next week.